tell us a little bit more, how do you understand citizen journalism? Like, what kind of definition do you have for it? And what are its pros and its cons?
Well, actually, I don't have the definition because I still haven't come to terms with the term citizen journalism and tend to reject it in many ways. I do not see citizens journalism as a separate branch of journalism, and I do not actually juxtapose professional journalism and citizen journalism. There is good journalism and bad journalism. And sometimes in the so-called citizens journalism, you find brilliant examples of journalism. And the same, in the so-called professional journalism, you find a lot of trash. In common terms, citizens journalism is when a person who was not educated as a journalist publishes something or disseminates something other than through recognized media outlets. But here's the question. Listen, I was going here. There's a hole in the asphalt on the crossing of Pushkinska, of Grinchenka and Prorizna. I made a photo. I am not a journalist, but I send it to a Kiev newspaper or to a Kiev internet site, and they publish it. What is it? Is an act of citizen journalism or an act of professional journalism? I think it's a good example of the combination of both. I think that some people who have a lot of money and power but want to have more have for many years been working to move us apart, the so-called professional journalists and citizen journalism. They were looking for the ways to make us compete, not combine our efforts. And this was happening, I'm absolutely sure, in Ukraine, in Russia, in the United States, and in some other countries. It was not so much happening, for instance, in the UK or France, but in many other countries it was. Because if we, again, and here we come to the basic question or basic issue of links with the public. If you juxtapose professional journalism and citizen journalism, then you cut the nerve that puts them together. And again, who is a professional journalist? I came to journalism with no journalist education. When had I become a professional journalist? As soon as I was offered the job? As soon as I have written my first article already on the job? Maybe in 3 or 4 years when I learned to write in the way that they put my articles in print without any corrections? Or maybe only after this story when I realized that I should not lie, which came not 3 or 4, but something like 5 or 6 years after I started. Where is professional journalism? I think you become a professional journalist when you understand that you cannot work any other way that you are working, and when you are prepared to face a lot of pressure to protect your principles.
So you co-founded Hromadske Radio in 2013, right?
Yep.
Could you tell us a little bit about how that came about, why you started it, and what kind of niche you were trying to fill with it?
Well, radio, because I am one of the biggest proponents of radio in this country, very modestly, but very rarely. When in spring of 2013, 3 different people came to me within 3 days and said that they could not work in their media outlets any longer for reasons of being pressurized and being told to do what they did not want to do, and asked, what shall we do? I said, But of course we should found our own radio. So we started several reasons. First, it is cheap. It is so cheap to found a radio. We actually took out something like 300 to 400 hryvnias, which was of course more, but something like $40 to $50 at that time. Everyone took out of our pockets. We bought our first recorders, bought our first legal software, because we wanted to be irreproachable. And we started the radio, although we, of course, for quite some time we thought that we would remain a podcast or internet operation. We had not dreamt of having our own frequency, and it took quite some changes in the country for us to become a real broadcasting radio station. And by the way, solidarity of some colleagues from commercial radio stations. So, radio, because it is cheap, because I think it is much more democratic in its essence, in its nature, than any other means of communication in media. It is not as imposing as television. It is not as anonymous as the internet may be. And it entices people to take part in public discussion. It is the best platform and the simple one technologically to organize nationwide or region-wide or city-wide discussion of topics. That was the idea behind the public radio.
So you said that Hromadske Radio is pretty cheap, but could you tell us a little bit more about how it's funded and like how does Hromadske Radio stay alive?
It stays alive despite everything. Unfortunately, we are very, very poor because we used to be very, very rich. But this was not the money we earned. This was the money that we got from donors. It's mostly international donors, like USAID, Canadian, similar Canadian fund, or Czechs or Poles, whoever. We even had some operation with Japanese, as far as I remember. So almost 95% of our funding comes or used to come from international grants. And there's one very important chunk of our financing which sometimes goes up to 3% or probably even 4%, crowdfunding. Crowdfunding. We have conducted 5 successful and 1 unsuccessful crowdfunding campaigns in Ukraine. When we were in very dire straits, we appealed to the public and said, listen, we are on the brink of losing this or this or this product. If you want to listen to it any longer, give us the money. In return, we do this and this. In most of the cases, people wanted to listen, they gave us money, and we reported back to them. We also had 2 successful campaigns in the US and Canada, mostly organized by our Ukrainian American or Canadian Ukrainian.
Okay, to that end, how can people best support you and what you do, and where can they find you on the web?
Well, first of all, it's a very simple site, hromadske.radio. Publish all our output on this site. Whatever goes on air soon appears on the site, both in podcast form and sometimes, well, probably a quarter of what goes on air also appears as publications, transcribed publications.
Thank you so much for your time. This has really been really inspirational and very enlightening. So thank you so much. And it was absolutely great to meet you. Thank you so much.